why I feel this is so unfair is that the qualities needed of a woman to succeed in her career, in the workplace, are the exact opposite of the qualities needed from her in her home and in her family life. Every time I got $1 for when I was called an overthinker, I would be a millionaire by now and I wouldn't have had to start passive income streams like this one.
But trust us, we're not overthinking girlies. In fact, I reckon others are perhaps just not thinking enough.
But don't worry, we've got you covered because we're here to think on your behalf on all the things that matter to you and to us with the girls who overthink.
With Girls Who Think, the
podcast.
podcast. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Welcome to Girls Who Think, the pod. And our topic is my favorite, boss babe versus soft girl. And you're the picture of a boss babe. Tell me about
Which
that.
is why I think this is the most fitting first episode for our podcast together. Because for our listeners tuning in today, thank you so much. And I remember meeting Simran through our publisher for a book fair where I was launching my book and her book was on display. And she walked in and I had just heard that there is this beautiful romance fiction which they have on the aisle and the author is supposed to be coming in. And the moment you walked in, I just knew it had to be you. You just had this soft girl era oozing out of you, which made me just certain that that had to be you.
I remember you said you walked up to me and said that, hey, are you the author of Like a Summer Song? And I said, yeah. And you were like, I can literally figure it out because you're dressed like a romance author.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
You looked the part. You were the picture of a romance fiction author.
Wow, wonderful. So, what do you think about the conflict of the boss babe versus the soft girl era?
So it's the hustle of being the boss babe that has kind of taken over culture as we know it. And for women, I know that it can become a huge task, especially women who are kind of handling like their home turf, especially women that are married and have a home of their own. I feel like it's way tougher for them because it's not easy to switch the roles, right? We were discussing about that. It's a topic we've discussed to death.
I know. We talk about it so much and I feel inherently women today, more than ever, have this conflict in them where they don't know whether to be a boss babe or a soft girl. And I think more or less everybody's realizing you can't be either or. And why I feel this is so unfair is that the qualities needed of a woman to succeed in her career, in the workplace, are the exact opposite of the qualities needed from her in her home and in her family life, especially if you want to be with a quote-unquote masculine man. You need things like warmth, nurturing, empathy, all of that. But to break the glass ceiling at work, you need to be a fighter. You need to fight for that promotion. You need to hustle and grind it out. These are completely opposite personas. And a woman is expected to like switch from this to that. How? You can't do that. It's so much cognitive dissonance. And I think there's so much pressure on women today where we're trying to be both. And I think it's such convoluted, confusing messaging. And I think most of the women around us are not able to do it all. And that's the truth. You can't do it all, right?
Yeah, doing it all is such a myth in any case, right? Like, I feel like women who pick either or, a lot of times women do have to pick an either or situation.
You have to pick
and when they're
one
picking,
persona.
It's always one of those situations, right, where grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah.
And I feel like we are raised in a generation where it's kind of, for the major part, been on the other end of the spectrum, meaning that women who've been hustling have kind of been respected a lot more, which was not the case earlier. Earlier, it was kind of looked down upon. It was more like, why would you really need to be working? It was always like a question that was asked of women in our mother's generations, maybe.
And I think now it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Oh, you're not doing a job? That's so looked down upon. If today I want to choose just a happy married life where my husband's paying the bills, I feel embarrassed and I feel awkward in expecting that. Even when I go out on a date, I feel uncomfortable. It took me so much time to gain the confidence in saying that, hey, I want a man who'd pay my bills, because as a woman, I am bringing a lot more to the table and there's a lot more that's expected of me, which I will have to do, right? You can't carry my baby for 9 months. Can you do it for 4.5 months? No, right? So where's 50-50 in that? Anyone who talks about 50-50 relationships. it's just so convoluted. I don't know. And only when you reach a certain age and when you're dabbling with those decisions and when you're dabbling with those choices is when you realize that it is a little messed up and you have to pick something and there's no right answer. I
Yeah.
think everybody has something that's right for them, individual, I mean, kind of tailored to who you are as a person, but fundamentally, objectively, there's no right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when my book was launching, it was launched by Chetan Bhagat. It was in Cyber Hub actually, and I remember him asking me that, "Oh, you're 30, and how do you kind of deal with the pressure of getting married and kind of choosing to create your own career path over the questions of kind of getting married at this age?"
Yeah.
And I think I gave a really frivolous answer then, but it was a question that stayed with me because I hadn't thought about it. In my
Yeah.
environment, thankfully, we were just out of COVID. My parents are super supportive. It was not a question that was really a huge pressure for me. But I thought a lot about it, and I remember coming to the conclusion that I realized that for women to have the life that they dream of, you need two things. One is financial independence, and the second is the courage to be disliked. Because
Wow. I love that. There's
we
a book titled
the
The
courage to
Courage
be
to Be
disliked.
Disliked.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing, right? Like people talk so much about financial independence, and while women have achieved that to a great degree, emotional independence is still something that is an
Yeah.
elusive dream for a lot of women. It's not just women also, right? Like people, humans are a product of their social dynamics. I mean, it is so important to feel validated in the environment that you exist in, and I feel like
Yeah.
without that, finding peace is going to be such a difficult thing, which is where I think it leads to our topic. Our societal conditioning is so either or, and that is where a lot of the dissatisfaction kind of really stems from.
Yeah. So what do you think about the cost of the boss babe life? Because I really think about it only when I kind of started working on my feminine energy and started healing my quote unquote wounded masculine. I would delve into it later, but maybe in another episode. But yeah, only when I kind of started to nurture this soft girl side, where I started to develop routines and rituals where I feel good about myself and I was able to kind of calm my nervous system, is when I realized that when I was in that hustling, grinding it out era, I had a dysregulated nervous system. I was dealing with PCOD, I was dealing with acne, I was dealing with hormonal imbalances. And these are things that almost every other girl, I get a lot of young women who come up and talk to me about PCOD and stuff like that. And it hurts me to think that every other woman is going through it. According to statistics, it's about more than 40% of women today have PCOD. And I remember when I was diagnosed with PCOD, I didn't even know anything about feminine energy. I was just in that hustle mode and I didn't know how it was affecting me physically, emotionally. And I think this is, in my opinion, the cost of the boss babe life, where women are expected to do it all, grind it out at their 9 to 5, come back home, take care of the household. And I think in the name of feminism, in the name of equal opportunity, we've put double the work and double the pressure on women to even perform outside of the home. But then the pressure to perform inside of the home has never gone. And that's always been there, quote unquote. Even if you have a man who supports you and you have help and everything at home, which most Indian households do in urban families, there's still the pressure to make a home, make sure there's food on the table, make sure the refrigerator is stocked up, make sure that everything's done up, is on the woman. And I think it's just unfair in many ways. And I think that's the cost of the boss babe life, where I'm doing it all, but how am I paying the price? I'm paying the price in terms of health, in terms of my physical and emotional and mental health. So what's your experience been there with
So,
burnout and hustle?
I don't think that leadership is something that is completely separate from feminine energy. I know that it is predominantly seen as a very masculine trait, but it kind of depends on what inside of you really leverage to be a
Yeah.
leader at work. Also, I was having this discussion with a friend who's been suffering through a massive burnout. I mean, she's one of the most brilliant people I know, and she's been suffering through a massive burnout. And she was talking to me about exactly that, about how her feminine energy has kind of had to take such a back seat because she's had to be so separate from her natural ways of how she would want to live her life. But that was also because I think she was not happy at her workplace. She was doing it purely for money, and that caused a lot of stress on her, which I think would cause a lot of stress to anybody.
Yeah.
And I feel like my journey at work, or even kind of realizing the toll that the hustle culture takes, makes me realize the burden of the expectation on men also. I mean, enough has been said and celebrated about men, of course, but this is something that is just expected of them. It's taken for granted about them
Yeah.
as well. And it takes a toll on anybody. So that's number one. And secondly, I mean, again, like I said, I don't necessarily think that leadership is something that's separate from a feminine energy. It depends on what you're using inside of you to bring the leader out, right? Like for me, I work in a family business. That I understand is a huge privilege. For me, though, my work is something that's related to my sense of identity. It's related to my father's effort, and for me to nurture that comes from the most feminine aspects of my
That's so
personality.
beautiful.
So, it's something that I love so deeply.
That's
It's something that I would
beautiful.
never want to separate myself from, even though I would at some point hope that I get married. At some point I hope I go through the experience of motherhood. At the same time, I know that I love this as well, and women
Yeah.
can love more than one thing, in their life. And that's what I feel like this phenomenon that's kind of coming in right now about how feminine energy is getting wounded by being in the hustle culture. I also feel like is kind of undermining a lot of the gains of the feminist movement that happened in the 80s and 90s. It's actually an article, there's an academic article on that by Angela McRobbie, where she calls this post-feminism, which is kind of like the dismantling of feminism itself. So I feel like the ideal situation for women would really come down to allowing both to flow freely, and really allowing women to kind of make the choice for themselves without really
Yeah.
the fear of judgment.
Yeah. I loved a few things that you touched upon, especially how leadership is not necessarily a masculine trait. I completely agree with it. In fact, if you look at it, the traits needed for you to be a leader at work or in any area of your life are actually very feminine qualities, like creativity, empathy,
Exactly.
right? Just people skills, soft skills that are needed for you to really, reach a certain place in your life.
Yeah.
I think those are all feminine traits.
Actually, I think there was data on this. There was some research that happened which said that men are actually, the moment that there is conflict at work or whatever, like their natural instinct is to either scream or lash out, whereas women are respectful regardless of, again, this is of course, I'm sure, based on
Very
a
person
sample
to
set,
person.
very person to person. But women have been known to have a higher emotional intelligence, which is more
Absolutely.
about how you respond to situations, not about the situations that are happening to you, really,
Correct.
which make women ideal candidates to be actually in leadership positions. But the environment, whether that's enabling her to be in that position or not, is where the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. And this is a conversation I was having with my partner where I told him that, if you want me to be this graceful feminine woman, which you do, I know that we've had conflicts about it, then you need to provide that environment. The moment you're not able to be there for me and provide that safety net and that little comfort space for me, I change, right? Like, for example, it's a very corny example, but for a flower to grow and bloom, it needs the right sunlight and moisture and warm soil, right? That's when it blooms and it flowers. If you take that away, it's desert, baby. It's cactus. My thorns will come out. What do you expect? I have to fend for myself. I can't be soft and feminine. I am going to be like, you know, I am going to be harsh and masculine and all of that if I have to fend for myself. You have to provide me that safety net. The moment you recede is when I become bitter. So, you have to be there if you want softness and warmth from me. So, I think it's just that dynamics. And another thing that I really loved about what you said is how I think we're living in a time where the concept of gender and identity is getting very fluid, right? Even men have feminine traits and women have masculine traits, right? We all have masculine and feminine energy. It's just that women have more feminine energy and feminine traits, men have more masculine traits. So, the world that we're living in is so complex today, right? In different environments, we have different duties. So, essentially men and women have to draw from both their masculine and feminine reserves depending upon the situation and the environment. As a woman, I need to draw from my masculine energy of hustle and grind at work if I have to break the glass ceiling. But when I come home, I need to become a little more warmer. I have to become a warm, nurturing person for my family, for my friends. And I think here's where the concept of rituals and routines is so important, because I could be doing whatever at work, but when I come home, I would have had the worst day at work. But when I come home, I know I will slip into my luxurious satin pajama set, I will do my skincare, I will light my candle, I will read my book, and I will feel like the most feminine, soft girl, who can be focused on herself. And I think having those boundaries between both your masculine energy and feminine energy, between work and your personal life, and having your own rituals that make you feel a certain way are so important if you have to have it all. If at all, you can have it all.
Yeah, and that's something that I'll probably learn from you, because I, for one, like that adds stress to me, because I'm like, oh, that's another checklist for me to handle. And at the end of the work day, when I come back home, I just want to like pig out. Like I just want to change into the loosest tee that I have, the guyest pajama shorts that I have, and I just want to like look at Netflix.
You do you.
Yeah,
You do you.
I know, I do me, but I do feel like maybe I could enrich my life better if I did integrate some of those rituals, and I would love to come to that in just a moment. But because we're going to be creating this podcast as two writers, I wanted to kind of bring in some bookish knowledge and talk to the women who resonate with me on the boss babe culture or the hustle culture. And I wanted to kind of summarize from this beautiful book called Burnout, and I've written a few points actually, where it kind of talks to women who really suffer through the emotional volatility that kind of being in the masculine, the toll that it takes on people, right? So I'll just quickly go through that. All right, so here are the top 5 takeaways from this book called Burnout, which is the secret to unlocking the stress cycle. The first point that it actually says is to complete the stress cycle, which is that, stress itself isn't harmful. It's getting stuck in the stress cycle that leads to burnout. And the book actually explains that we need to complete the stress cycle by physically releasing stress from our bodies through activities like exercise, deep breathing, or even crying.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God, that's so true. Anytime I am going through this phase of, burnout, quote unquote, the thing that helps me is a workout. And I think, again, I would like to kind of circle it back to feminine energy. When I am on my Pilates table, I think when I'm on the yoga mat, I'm wearing like a nice set of yoga pants. I think I feel like I can take on the world. So I think, it comes back to rituals, right?
Yeah, that comes back to rituals again, right?
Yeah.
And kind of just allowing ourselves to complete the stress cycle with the various rituals that we pick up along the way.
Yeah, you define that for yourself.
And you define that for yourself. And the second pointer from the book that I really picked up on is that rest is not optional. And I feel like you would love this, because that kind of comes back to what you were talking about, making sure that you're allotting time for rest, which is so important, even for athletes or even for people who are doing rigorous work, physical rigorous work. Rest is such an integral part of like their routine. And I feel like we don't realize that, working really hard mentally also requires the same recovery time.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to see rest as productive.
Yeah.
Because we're not conditioned to see it like that. So many of us keep punishing ourselves with more work and never giving ourselves that gracious time to rest and recover. Like, I still struggle with it. I still feel like I don't deserve rest. Okay, if I sleep for 6-7 hours a night, that's enough. But again, coming back to the whole feminine masculine thing, like women need more rest.
Yes.
For example, there are studies that show that women need about 10 hours of sleep in order to function in a similar way that a man does, while a man maybe does 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I think...
But also for women, like our rest that really kind of needs to be integrated within our cycle is something that is so important and really not spoken about as much, is how much of our energy levels are really regulated by our period cycle. And that's something that is really not spoken about or
I know, like luteal phase is a
Yeah.
phase where you need rest. You need
Yes.
more rest, you cannot function. While when you're in your follicular phase, for example,
Yeah.
you are more perky, there are more energy levels in
Yeah.
your body. And I think my life also kind of changed for the better when I started cycle syncing that way. When I'm in my luteal phase, now I make that conscious decision where I realize that, okay, this is my time to rest.
Yeah.
I deserve it. Okay, as a woman with ovaries and a uterus, I deserve to take a break during this phase of my life when I'm not feeling the best. I don't have the highest energy level. I'm not feeling good emotionally and mentally. I deserve to rest. I think that's been such a game changer because before that, I would be still stretching myself thin, trying to achieve the same level of productivity in a phase that my cycle doesn't allow me to be as productive. And then I would like pick up fights with people, and then I would be,
Yeah. Make you
having
crankier.
cranky and aggressive and annoyed the entire time.
Yeah.
And I think that's where self awareness and just awareness about your body and about your feminine body is so important because it helps you, just do life better.
Just do life better.
And that's so important.
I actually
God
know
knows
a
we
lot
all
of-
need it.
We all need it, and I actually know women who kind of plan their meetings,
Yeah.
kind of synced with their cycle phases, and I know women would never kind of make deciding decisions, or they wouldn't really, make any decisive. What is the word? They wouldn't make any. They wouldn't really. They wouldn't really.
Ladies and
schedule-
gentlemen, as writers, when we forget words, I love it. We're also human, right?
Also human, right? My brain isn't braining today. But like seriously, they would kind of not really schedule their meetings in their luteal phase because they know that they're not going to be at their optimal, which is something that was such a revelation to me when I heard of it. And I heard of it like recently. I'm 33 now. I heard of that recently and I was like, wow, does it affect things that much? When I started to notice my moods and I started to notice my energy levels, I realized that till I didn't know this, I was really fighting against every grain in my body to kind of give it my all in my luteal phase. I realized that the fight was so much harder and it was taking a toll on how I was kind of receiving people around me. And I feel like that's not even fair to the people around me, right? So I think that kind of listening to your body is always
a good idea.
Always a good idea.
Which is why I totally believe in like cancelling plans during luteal phase. I think you're doing
You and me
people a
both.
service. I mean, I'm doing you a disservice if
Right?
I'm showing up and
I'm not
talking to
feeling
you and I'm not feeling it. Like you don't deserve that,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, your time is valuable, my time is valuable. Why
Yes.
should I come waste your time when I am not at my best, right?
Yeah.
When I can't give you the right experience of me,
Exactly.
I am doing you a disservice by telling you to give me time when I can't be my best, right?
Yeah.
It's unfair. That's what I believe in. But yeah, on that note, we'd love for our listeners to tell us what are their rituals and routines that help them unwind, feel softer, feel more in tune with who they are.
With who they are,
right?
yeah.
And of course, the struggles of the boss babe life, because God knows
We all have them.
infinite. So until then, this is Simran
And I'm Niharika.
signing off on Girls,
Who Think
the
podcast.
podcast.
We'll get that right by the next one.